Yeah, so welcome everyone to the NASEO Buildings and Energy Affordability Committee webinar on extreme heat policy. It's great to see all of you. My name is Grace Lowe. I'm a program director on the energy economy team at NASEO, and we are jointly hosting this with our buildings committee team at NASEO. So really thrilled to have all of you. I'll just briefly go through some housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar. And can share it out afterwards as well as the slides. But welcome folks to chime in with questions, comments. Feel free to raise your hand or drop anything in the chat at any point. And if you can, just update your name on Zoom to include your name as well as your state or organization, so just so we know who all is in the room. And just briefly, I'll go through our agenda. We'll start with some introductions and community agreements, as well as an overview of the Energy Affordability and Buildings Committees and their updates. We will also be highlighting some recently released smart surfaces primers that NASEO put together. And then we're going to have a panel discussion on state policy and programmatic opportunities to address extreme heat. Really glad to have Blake Shalide with the Oregon Department of Energy, who is also on the leadership team for the NASEO Buildings Committee, moderating the discussion. And we'll first hear from Grace Wickerson with the Federation of American Scientists to talk a little bit about their state heat policy agenda and some recent tools that they've launched. And then we'll hear from Eileen Eagleton with the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, who will speak a little bit about their Urban Heat Island program and other extreme heat initiatives. And welcome questions throughout, but we will save some time for discussion with the panelists and questions from the audience towards the end. So we typically start our Energy Affordability Committee meetings with some community agreements. I'll let folks read through these in a moment, but if you ever have any to add to this list, feel free to reach out at any point. And these are adapted from a presentation given by Quinn Parker with In Color. So I'll just give folks a minute to read through those. All right, and just a few updates from the Energy Affordability Committee side of things. First, for folks who have not engaged with the committee, it is open to all state and territory energy offices as well as affiliate partners. It meets on a bi-monthly basis and covers the full spectrum of energy affordability topics, including system-level approaches to reduce costs, as well as programmatic approaches and ways to increase access to energy programs for households and businesses to benefit. And it is guided by a leadership team chaired by Stephanie Encinas Hondo in Colorado, as well as Mark Finley in Tennessee and Tony Morgan in Florida. And we are really pleased to announce that we've expanded the leadership team to include some new members, including Christine Knapp with Pennsylvania, Josh Elliott with New Hampshire, Lauren Rosenstein with Oregon, and Tracy Smetna with Minnesota. So thanks to all of them for their guidance and participation in that leadership team. And if other folks have ideas or suggestions for topics that you'd like to be covered by the Energy Affordability Committee, please feel free to reach out to anyone on the NASEO team listed here. We also have an energy affordability resource library that we have been adding to, and welcome additions from all of you when you get a chance. So just really glad to be having this conversation today. I think from an energy affordability perspective, extreme heat, of course, increases cooling needs during the summer months in particular, which can increase bills and also poses health and safety risks for customers and households that may not have access to energy efficiency upgrades or insulated housing. So it can really affect vulnerable communities and populations in particular. So really glad to be having this conversation, and I will turn it over to Jasmine for some updates from the Buildings Committee.
Thank you, Grace, and nice to see everybody. A lot of the buildings program here at NASEO has had our arms full with standing up our second annual NASEO National Building Summit. So this will be taking place at our office at 1812 North Moore Street in Arlington, Virginia on July 29th through 30th. The event website is live. It contains the registration link as well as an agenda, and we expect it to be super well attended and have representation from several state energy offices. It'll also directly follow our annual or summer board meeting for the NASEO Board of Directors. So we expect several state energy office directors to be in attendance as well, and are very excited to convene them around the topics of energy efficiency within our built environment, about energy optimization, grid edge resources, affordability. And then we also are anticipating a great turnout from all of our affiliate partners, as well as some Department of Energy partners. So all that can be found online. Again, I'm happy to drop the link to our event page. And we've also noted a few of our resources from recent meetings on our Buildings Committee website, which is linked here. A copy of the slides will be shared around, as Grace mentioned earlier in the call. And we're really excited about today's agenda. We're excited to welcome the Federation of American Scientists, recalling back that we hosted a meeting with them back in October of 2025 to highlight their resources on state and local agencies and government work towards extreme heat, resistance, and affordable cooling. And I believe we, back in October, highlighted a policy toolkit that they titled Too Hot Not to Handle. And I think that paired very well with some resources that we have on our site that we developed in recent years. And those were called Beating the Heat. So we all have an affinity for fun catchphrases around this topic. And we're really excited today to be giving them an opportunity to speak on a new heat policy agenda related to state and local governments, and are also very excited to hear from New Jersey Board of Public Utilities and our leadership member from the Oregon Department of Energy on the various state approaches, as this has become a very timely topic every year, and more recently in recent years, more so than the past. So I think with all that, I'll pass things back over to Grace and Arvin to go through some of our smart surfaces resources and new primers on our website.
Thanks, Jasmine. Yeah, so really excited to share some takeaways from the Cities for Smart Surfaces project that NASEO worked on in collaboration with the Smart Surfaces Coalition, which organizes a cohort of more than 40 organizations across the country and has been helping 10 cities, as well as some additional cities, to increase the adoption of smart surfaces strategies and help improve resilience across these cities in the face of extreme heat and flooding, using a combination of data and education, decision tools, and policy guidance. So just briefly, if you're not familiar with the term smart surfaces, it was coined by the Smart Surfaces Coalition, and it's reflective of the set of resilient infrastructure strategies that can help reduce extreme heat or mitigate extreme heat and flooding impacts, while also improving energy affordability and comfort. So they include everything from reflective and cool roofs, green roofs, porous and permeable pavements, solar panels, reflective and cool pavements, trees, green stormwater infrastructure, and lower carbon intensity materials. So NASEO has been focused on helping kind of translate some of these lessons and strategies for state energy offices in particular, and especially states where the 10 cities were participating. And we've tried to articulate some of the benefits of smart surfaces and how they connect to state energy offices' goals across affordability, reliability, resilience, economic development, and environmental stewardship. So just a few points to hit on from the affordability side. They can help reduce cooling load and lower energy costs, improve thermal comfort, and also increase the cost effectiveness of solar panels when cool roofs are combined with solar panels. They have a lot of reliability and resilience benefits by reducing peak cooling demand during the summer, and also reducing reliance on peaking plants, which can also help improve air quality in addition to shade trees and green stormwater infrastructure. And of course, the jobs for smart surfaces are local because they're local infrastructure improvements. And it can also help address summer tourism and make it more comfortable to be outside, especially in urban environments. So, just a few of the benefits that we think might be of interest given state energy offices' goals. And to kind of articulate this further and help identify some opportunities for action for state energy offices, NASEO put together a set of primers focused on how state energy offices can support implementation through policy, programs, and planning work. So we have 5 primers that are now out on our website. You can find them on the publications page. Unfortunately, our website is having some technical difficulties, so if they're not showing up for you, check back in a day or two. But they are out there for your reading, and happy to answer any questions about them. Um, we have one primer on advancing energy reliability and resilience with smart surfaces, another on integrating solar with cool roof technologies, one on transportation, one on state energy planning, and another focused on building energy codes. So check those out, and I'll pass it over to Arvan, who focused on many of these, and in particular on the transportation primer.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. Yeah, there's a great overview of the primers. Not too much to add on um, background on smart surfaces. Obviously, Grace gave a very solid overview there. But with regards to the transportation primer, which was one that we worked on and are very proud of, the sort of impetus behind it came from um, given how integrated transportation infrastructure is in our communities and its potential as an avenue for integration of smart surfaces, we decided we wanted to put together a primer to highlight where the sort of overlaps lie, which is again also the sort of reasonings we decided to put all these primers together. But just a few examples of some smart surfaces that are included within transportation and transportation infrastructure can include reflective road pavements, solar canopy installations over parking lots, bus terminals, as well as green corridors within traffic infrastructure. So things that people are mostly familiar with, but sort of a focus on how to integrate these things and how state energy offices can work on integrating these smart service technologies within our transportation system. Along with the ambient temperature reduction and positive health outcomes, as well as affordability benefits that Grace already went over, that come from smart surfaces integration, transportation safety is also an area that can be positively impacted and that is positively impacted through things like increased nighttime road visibility, through reflective pavements, as well as other interesting things like smart surfaces. Like interventions around green infrastructure within traffic calming infrastructure that can actually slow vehicles down. So things like curb extensions and with rain gardens, as well as protected bike and bus lanes that have solar reflective coatings or solar panel canopies. Um, and so all of these examples and the sort of reasoning that we wanted to cover these topics shows that the impacts of smart surfaces really do stretch beyond just heat reduction and the they impact all aspects of civilian life from affordability to health and safety and a lot more. So yeah, we're really excited that these are out. I know we have a few folks from Smart Surfaces Coalition, Bill and Anna, on the call as well. So I'm sure they'd be happy to chat with you at some point about the work that they do. But with that, I'll pass it back to Grace. I know she has a few resources and tools to go over as well related to smart surfaces.
Yes, thanks, Arvin. And thanks to the Smart Surfaces Coalition. Glad to see you all here. Just a few additional tools and resources to highlight. Jasmine already mentioned the Beating the Heat report. Be sure to take a look at that. And the Smart Surfaces Coalition also has a lot of resources on their website, both for cities and for states to take advantage of. They have a project design platform that includes a cost benefit analysis calculator on the project level, as well as a citywide benefit cost analysis tool, a policy tracker that includes a lot of different state and local policies that can help implement smart surfaces. They have spec sheets, a project design checklist, lots to explore and use in your work. So check those out. And again, we'll share all of these links when we distribute the slides after the meeting. So thanks so much. And I think now we will turn it to Blake to kick off the discussion on state actions to address extreme heat.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. Thanks, Jasmine and Arvon, too, for kicking us off today and giving an overview of all those great resources from NASEO that are available. I'm Blake Schlide. I manage the Codes and Standards section at the Oregon Department of Energy. Excited to be here. I think this is a really important topic, and really glad that NASEO is bringing everybody together to discuss it and to hear from a couple of experts later on today. I think, like many areas of the country, Oregon and the Pacific Northwest have been experiencing summer heat waves that at some point have, can be catastrophic and are really shifting our region's power demand profile in a lot of different ways. A lot of the work that we do within at least our section at the Oregon Department of Energy has to do with energy efficiency in buildings. And I think there's really a strong nexus between efficiency and heat relief and cooling needs, kind of as we all, I think, understand, more efficient buildings are also more comfortable, and they've got better indoor air quality and better temperature control, and just lead to a better occupant comfort experience. So that's one area that that we recognize the benefit of just increasing efficiency with regard to better buildings that provide more heat relief and cooling needs. As a state in general, we've also been involved in kind of led a cooling needs study in our state. We administer various programs that fund installation of energy efficient heat pumps. We've been working on some energy code updates in the residential space that recognize that more homes in Oregon more new construction homes are being installed with air conditioning where they haven't necessarily been in the past. I think for decades, most new homes did not have cooling, but now we're seeing kind of a flip in that trend. So we've got new energy code measures going into the next code that prioritize heat pump installation. Where somebody does install cooling, it would have to be a heat pump to provide that first stage of heating, and then also provide a cooling benefit for the occupants as well, to make sure that we're maximizing the efficiency of our heating and cooling systems. One of the other areas that I think is really important in conjunction with this is demand response. As an agency, we have some product efficiency standards that we administer, including a water heater demand response capable standard. So I think as more of these demand response programs and products are put into place, that will provide our utilities and our consumers with more flexibility with managing power peaks and grid demand to maintain a more resilient grid and provide more room on the grid, more reliable, more passive survivability, and reduced energy cost burdens for the folks that live and work in our buildings, especially among more vulnerable communities. More recently, we've been participating as a subject matter expert on a heat relief work group that's exploring policy options in advance of Oregon's next legislative session in 2027. That group met last week, and from what I understand from our two representatives that were on that working group, there was a lot of positive discussion about funding and augmenting some existing programs that in Oregon that focus on weatherization, heat pump incentives, and enabling repairs and upgrades. And then there's also a preliminary idea for having data centers kind of pitch in to fund energy efficiency programming that can shave peak load and improve public health and affordability for the folks that actually benefit from the project. So that concept is gaining traction. I think it's all really early, but definitely when you're talking about more grid demand from heat waves, coupled with increasing loads from industry like data centers, there's definitely a relationship there that needs to be explored. So with that, I'm going to kick off our presentation. So I think next up, we've got Grace Wickerson, who's a senior manager of climate and health with the Federation of American Scientists, that will provide an overview of the 2026 state and local heat policy agenda and implementation resources. And then Aileen Eagleton, who's a research scientist with the Office of Clean Energy Equity with the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, will present on New Jersey's Urban Heat Island program. So before I turn it over to our presenters, I'll just note that at the end, there will be some time for audience-led Q&A. So please kind of be thinking of your questions as our presenters are going through. Be ready to ask and leverage their expertise and to share your own experiences. So with that, I'll kick it over to our presenters.
Awesome. I'm happy to go first. My internet is telling me it's unstable, so I will do my best to track that, but someone can bat signal me if it goes off. Well, I'm so pleased to be here today. I am seeing some familiar faces in the room, collaborators from Smart Surfaces, so just a good set of folks. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about our most recent release of the state and local heat policy agenda, which actually just came out on Tuesday. So perfect timing for this webinar as well. For folks that are not familiar with the Federation of American Scientists, we're a DC-based policy think tank working to connect scientists, practitioners into the policymaking process. We've been doing that for over 80 years. We were founded by a group of scientists, atomic scientists who'd worked on the Manhattan Project, who had decided that rather than sitting on the side, they wanted to be a part of influencing public policy. And so we've been doing that mission over the last many decades, expanding to other areas like artificial intelligence, climate, energy, education, and many others. And we are excited to partner and collaborate with government to make sure that we use the best ideas, talent, evidence, and expertise to drive policy in solving major challenges we face. So that's a bit about us. I'm happy to dive into our state and local heat policy agenda. I'll share a bit about where or the background behind why we took on this project. I'll give a little bit of a showcase of the implementation site, which I welcome you to interact with, engage with, and email me if you have any feedback on how to make it better. And then I'll close with some examples that we wanted to spotlight. Blake already set it up quite nicely, sharing what the great work is going on in Oregon, and I'll share a couple of other highlights that we noticed as we looked across all 50 states. So our organization has been working on extreme heat over the last 4 years, really seeing an opportunity to develop out this policy space, because as the issue has accelerated, we've seen increasing intention and concern, and we've helped to fill in the gap of available policy solutions in partnership with organizations like NASEO and Smart Surfaces Coalition. Part of our work was very federally oriented. So we developed a federal heat policy agenda that we released in early 2025, a roadmap for all kinds of related actions across the federal family, I think related to 30 different agencies on what they could do to build heat resilience. This has been a guidebook for members of Congress, helping them to think about how they can determine priorities. And we followed it up with a fact sheet series that dives into the different impacts of heat and how they connect to policy solutions. That's all available on our website. I'm happy to highlight it too in any follow-up materials. So that's our kind of framing in terms of where we started this work in early 2025. We had a map of what was possible federally and opportunities to move policy there, but also given some of what was happening in early 2025, and also, I think, a knowledge set from this understanding that much of the work of addressing extreme heat is at actually the state and local level. We wanted to take a look at what were the leading practices that were available for state and local governments. What was actually happening around the country in a way that could create a deeper picture of what could then be supportive of future federal policy. And that was then again, how could we then connect state and local innovation, practice, and effort to also how do we design more effective federal policies that then create resilience as we work across different levels of government. So part of this work that we were doing was we were to first find what were all of the policies that were happening around the country that we could connect back to heat resilience. So we looked at over 1,000 unique policies that we reviewed, inventoried, creating different categories and frameworks for how to make all of it make sense, given that there was more happening than we expected but just needed to give it some scaffolding to be able to help it be transferable. We also did a listening tour across the country, finding policymakers that were advancing heat in all kinds of sets and settings, where our focus areas were homes, workplaces, schools, and communities. And we actually, some of the folks who we engaged with are actually on this call. So thank you again for your time and a willingness to talk to our team. And then from there, we worked with 400 experts who then helped us to co-develop the final agenda. And we engaged with them through different modalities from interviews, roundtables, and surveys, all of which helped us to create a wrapper around the policies we found, the priorities we had, and sort of creating this architecture of what could a comprehensive heat agenda look like. I would say our work kind of dovetailed in two categories, and we have some focus areas of core places I'll share on the next slide, but we're balancing, I think, two things, and I even shared in the conversation today around what we can do in the short term versus what we need to be doing in the long term. So in the short term, we need to focus on how do we keep people safe in the places where they spend the most time. So that's, we think, our homes, workplaces, and schools and childcare. And also some surroundings like transportation and other elements by which people move between these different places. So what do you do in all these places? You think about, how do we get cooling into those sites? How do we require potential certain policies around indoor temperatures so that we actually can create a safety, health-informed safety standard to keep people secure in the heat? On the flip side, we can get those protections in place, well, they will not be enduring if we don't have a transformation of our communities. So how do we transform the way we build our infrastructure, our grids, water systems, urban environments, so that they are ready to cope in the heat? And so we have a thing we've developed of just how do you get to build from the communities where people don't just survive the heat, which we're doing now, but they can thrive in it. There's not there's an ability to address all these different compounding risks that we're seeing because of heat waves, and that we can actually potentially address that through a range of different public policy solutions. So our focus areas, as I kind of teed up on the previous slide, are our homes, workplaces, schools and childcare, and communities. So safe homes, workplaces, schools, and childcare are both addressing that need for protections in the now, and also thinking about how do we build better, and how do we actually prepare for the temperatures that are coming in these sets and settings. In safe communities, we orient to both the planning and preparedness needed to respond to heat waves, to do what's needed in the acute events, but really a deep focus on what do we need to build differently to be able to be resilient as heat waves grow more severe. And so I'll take the website just next. We have developed, in support of helping people to orient to this framework of talking about extreme heat, an implementation guide. So we see as one of the first ever heat policy taxonomies that allows decision makers to orient to these top line goals of protecting people from extreme heat and creating safe communities. And then what are some targets that we can be pursuing to get households the cooling they need, to make energy more affordable, to plan for heat in all kinds of communities. We then found a summary of strategies. These are buckets that all are connected to different recommendations to help you think about kind of what are the different strategies that then help you to achieve that goal of, say, more affordable energy so that people can use their cooling if they desire to keep themselves cool. And from there, we looked at then categorizing those different examples to finding some of the unique policy actions and then helping to attach those examples to those policy actions. So it's a lot of a Russian doll of finding a way to organize the heat policies that we were identifying. We also went to find examples of state level action, highlighting at this first cut, the website, some of the most interesting and innovative. So welcome you to engage with what's there. And if there's stuff that you would like to see highlighted, we'd be happy to talk about highlighting those on the site. We'd love to be building this out in real time as things happen and we grow this work together. So I will just do a quick demo of the website, which I need to stop sharing and then reshare. So we're resharing. Awesome. So this is available at heatagenda.us, which hopefully it will remind a memorable URL, and also we can drop it in the chat. So on our main page is the agenda itself. So it's the goals and priorities that I mentioned we summarized from our conversations with our policymakers experts over the last year and a half. So these are some of the focus areas that we identified through that work. So just highlighting safe homes as an example, we have our right to cooling work, energy access, homes, housing, retrofits, and for future supply. Excited to hear about some of that future supply that includes cooling. That's an important component of this work. And then again, really thinking about the large load challenge, the data center challenge, and how do we ensure continued reliability and affordability as we understand that near-term addition to the grid. So in our implementation guide, we organize it by our different focus areas. So if you just click into, say, safe homes, this is an energy affordability group and buildings group. So we jump into protect energy access. You can see the strategies that we found as some of the core ones to this recommendation. And if you're to say, look at energy bill programs assistance, we have found these discrete policy actions that I mentioned and then summarized them through links directly to the government program. So this is hopefully then a good one-stop shop to be able to jump around to see different policies. And again, if there's things that are not here or things you're interested in talking more about, feel free to reach out to me. And then on our State Explorer page, we have our spotlights, our first cut of spotlights. So you can jump to any state and you'll see some spotlights that we found. So say we jump to Illinois, well, you can see a couple of spotlights that we found across our different focus areas. And you can read a little bit about it below. So excited to hear folks' feedback. I've already heard some good feedback, both positives and how do we make the site more navigable. So excited to hear any and all. No feedback is bad feedback, in my opinion. Sorry, 1 second. I gotta figure out what happened to my slides. I think I have to reshare. Okay. Cool. Who knew that jumping between things would be difficult? So I thought I would just highlight a couple, and I know we'll hear from New Jersey next. So, and their program is a real unique one that I'm just really find it is such an impressive example of how to connect heat to energy. But I thought I would talk a bit about some of the core themes that are coming out of the agenda that I would not be a surprise to the members of this group. But some of the things that we heard along the journey and things that we were particularly looking for ways to talk about and also solutions into addressing it are affordability and heat, as was highlighted in the previous presentation on smart surfaces. How do we make sure that this is a connective challenge and that it's, again, not just an affordability issue, but also a health issue if people can't afford to keep themselves in safe and cool environments. Lots too about buildings and heat. So how do we prepare a building stock for extreme heat and do it in a way that isn't going to massively expand our power consumption? How do we think about all kinds of strategies like a cool roof in addition to new heat pumps that allow us to be efficient in the way that we're installing cooling? And much of which also can have co-benefits. We know indoor air quality is of interest to this group. There's clear connections between all of these different technologies working together. And then yes, resilience and heat. So not just the reliability challenges, but then the ongoing threats to energy generation too, because of heat, like drought, affecting different dams, other many kinds of things. Even in Europe, we saw challenges with nuclear energy because of extreme heat. So looking at both the short-term challenges and a long-term need to build resilience. So I'll just quickly walk through a couple of these spotlights to be mindful of my time, and I'll walk through them by the different intersects. So I have a couple of each. So on our kind of affordability nexus, we know that there's an increasing interest in disconnection protections because of hot days. So Arizona has probably the most substantial policy here. They protect from disconnections during all hot weather, which I believe is above 90 or 95, as well as in the summer months. So it's a complementary policy looking at both hot days and seasonal protections to protect kind of in the most broad way. There's efforts here to complement that with weatherization funding in order to help in terms of ongoing affordability. So it gives, again, a picture of this, in our opinion, is the first starting place. On the hot days, your energy should be available, and it is a health threat if not, which is what we heard throughout our different engagements and interviews. But to make energy affordable in a short-term and long-term way, you do need other complementary strategies. So Ohio, using some money from their low-income home energy assistance program, was able to create a one-time benefit for households that are in some kind of economic struggle to be able to get a cooling benefit. So this is actually not just for cooling bills, it also was helping pay for devices themselves. So this, again, provides some models of how to intervene when temperatures are high in order to create some level of protection, potentially, again, complemented with some disconnection protections to keep people safely cool in the most acute events. But in terms of a longer term strategy, and the moment that we're in around energy affordability, there are states like Washington that are looking more acutely at how do we bring down energy burden itself and bring it down to a level that could be considered reasonable per some research and data. So 6% of your income going to energy is considered to be it's considered to be a reasonable threshold. And so Washington set that as its target and has had its investor-owned utilities work to try to meet that 6% target. And so they did a great study. I just put a screen cap of it, but you can see they looked at some of the strategies that investor-owned utilities could pursue and also looked across their state energy burden and found different households that qualify for that. And so looking at this might even be a broader audience than, say, what would be your LIHEAP population. And so it provides, again, that long-term strategy to think about, okay, what is the burden itself and how do we work towards longer-term affordability? Looking at the building stock, there's a couple of things that we found interesting along the way. One are maximum indoor temperature standards. We're seeing them make their way into rental enforcement codes like Los Angeles County. But California did pass a law with some level of still to be determined implementation to set 82 degrees as a threshold for safe indoor temperatures. So this is like an evolving space we're going to be tracking quite closely and inherently will then require certain building strategies to be able to make that possible and will also for sure intersect with some of the affordability challenges that we talked about a bit earlier. Another interesting law that actually just passed a couple months ago was in Maryland. So Maryland had its two largest counties create air conditioning requirements and maximum indoor temperature standards that then the state adopted as statewide policy. So now in Maryland, landlords need to be installing and maintaining AC that is functional during the summer months. And in the summer months, there is a temperature threshold to be maintained. And this mirrors policies that exist for heating. And the last one, which focuses on new construction, again, we heard a great example from Oregon. I'm interested a lot in what is happening in Massachusetts around passive house. This is a part of the stretch code that Massachusetts is advancing. And one thing they did recently was as a part of a streamlining permitting package for new housing, they created an incentive for beyond code efforts. So incentivizing passive house construction through these accelerated permitting requirements. So we're excited to see where that goes, particularly because passive house is quite an effective strategy for thermal management, which is key to addressing extreme heat. Two more examples I'll highlight now, going to the reliability side. This was quite significant actually in our last heat dome that we experienced here in the US. But as more places are procuring electric buses, including schools and transportation agencies, we're seeing them be usable as grid assets during extreme temperatures. So this is a microgrid example that allowed for grid management during the high heat. And so this is interesting too, because as we have a safe schools platform, we're seeing that this is a very intersectional issue where investments in other places can actually be a part of larger resilience. So how to move in that direction as we're also thinking about the safety and security of kids. A cool electric school bus with air conditioning could be then a great asset in times of need. And the last thing I'll mention, California has actually one of the first statewide grant programs related to extreme heat resilience, which is an exciting effort that's investing in projects across the state. And one thing that they are doing with the Sacramento Municipal Utility District is helping to build out resilience hubs. So bringing utility financing in partnership with state dollars in order to design these centers. And they're focusing on both cooling, but also filtered clean air, knowing that California deals with compounding hazards like heat and wildfire smoke that do need that shared solution set. So in terms of next steps, or what would be helpful on our end, welcome you to engage with and share updates or share feedback on heatagenda.us. We're excited to have it out in the world, and we'll be using it as a ongoing sharing platform for resources and information. Again, if you're interested in talking to us about extreme heat in the different areas, since we work across a range of different heat policy issues, I'd be excited to chat. I can share my email in the chat as well. And lastly, we're also really interested in how to keep conversations going around these collective solutionings. We did some of these in advancement of developing the agenda and think there's certainly more to be done as we think about implementation support. So excited to keep in conversation, and I will cede my time back, and hopefully my Wi-Fi did indeed keep us going. So thanks all so much. Oh yeah, my email is on this slide, and excited to be in conversation.
Thank you so much, Grace. That was all really interesting and informative. And yeah, your audio came through great on my end the whole time. So no issues there. Yeah, some fantastic resources that were shared. I've already shared the Heat Agenda website with a couple other folks here in Oregon. So I think it's a really useful resource for us and probably for a lot of other jurisdictions as well. And thanks for highlighting some of the good things that are being done around the country too in different jurisdictions. So with that, I'll let Aileen go and present on New Jersey's Urban Heat Island program.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited about this opportunity to discuss the BPU's Urban Heat Island Mitigation Program, or UHI program, which recently launched. So today I'll be going over the UHI effect, the causes and impacts, the implications of extreme heat, and the UHI effect in New Jersey, particularly in overburdened municipalities. I'll be also discussing a BPU legacy program, the Cool Cities program, which demonstrated urban forestry results in energy efficiency. And then I'll be going into how the Urban Heat Island program grows upon or builds upon the BPU Cool Cities program and really focuses on community-driven strategies along with data-driven decision-making. Then I'll be going into UHI program project summaries, and then the outcomes, potential outcomes and future directions of these projects. So the urban heat island effect essentially is caused by concrete and asphalt, so impervious surfaces, trapping or absorbing heat. There's a prevalence of these types of surfaces in cities compared to outlying areas that have more green infrastructure and less prevalence of these impervious surfaces. So the urban heat island effect negatively impacts air quality. It exacerbates air pollution, which has negative health outcomes. It also impairs water quality through thermal pollution. And most importantly, the key point to today's discussion is that it drives up energy demand and lowers energy reliability. So the graph showing the average electric load is an example in New Orleans of energy demand. So the curve steeply inclines in higher temperatures, demonstrating higher cooling demand. And New Orleans is an example of an urban heat island. So extreme heat and land use definitely impacts energy demand. And also, extreme heat significantly increases grid strain, which can result in outages. So New Jersey is the fastest warming state in the Northeast. It's warming faster than the global average as well. And dense urban planning is partially driving this accelerated warming trend. And as I had mentioned, contributes to the urban heat island effect. And important to today's discussion in terms of energy affordability, based on an extreme heat survey that was conducted by the Interagency Council on Climate Resilience in New Jersey, a top concern for New Jersey residents is the cost of AC or cooling. And also importantly, one of the top concerns was no or limited access to AC, which also ties into energy affordability and cost concerns. So we looked into the disproportionate impacts of extreme heat based on various vulnerability indicators. So we looked at representative overburdened municipalities that have faced historic redlining practices and ongoing marginalization, primarily in neighborhoods that are low income and BIPOC. So New Jersey has a higher tree canopy cover compared to these OBMs, significantly so over 40%. Whereas these OBMs shown in the graph have tree canopy cover that's lower than 30%. I also looked into the temperature differences in these cities between outlining suburban areas and then these built up urban areas. And we found that on average, these cities experience temperatures during the summer months. We looked over like a decade period, 18 degrees Fahrenheit higher than outlying suburban areas. So it's a significant difference. Another important aspect that Grace from FAS mentioned earlier is energy burden, the percent of income that's spent on energy costs. We looked into DOE's low-income energy affordability data tool to get this information. And most of these overburdened municipalities have high to severe energy burdens, whereas the state has about 2 to 3% energy burden on average. Another important consideration in looking at vulnerability was renter occupancy rates. So importantly, in these overburdened municipalities, a majority of the population are renters. So we wanted to make sure in the design that we were investing in public spaces that would be accessible to renters and outdoor workers as well. But because renters have limitations in terms of what they can do in improving energy efficiency in their residences or appliance reliability, we wanted to, again, make sure that we were funding public spaces. So the previous speakers from NASEO and FAS as well beautifully explained the benefits of tree canopy and green infrastructure as a smart surface. And BPU corroborated this in the earlier 2000s. So the BPU, along with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, launched the Cool Cities program, which invested in expanded tree canopy in some of the largest urban centers throughout the state, which I had mentioned on the previous slides. And they were able to show that 2,000 trees that were planted in 2006 resulted in energy savings that could power 19 typical US households for 1 year, to put it into perspective. And important considerations for green infrastructure and tree canopy is that, as it was mentioned earlier, significantly reduces temperatures attributed to extreme heat and the UHI effect. It can also lower energy demand, depending on the study, up to 90%. And the mechanisms behind this is increased reflectivity, also a process known as evapotranspiration, which is an evaporative cooling process in which green infrastructure or plants release moisture into the air, transferring heat away from the surfaces, kind of like sweating, I guess, if you will. And then also it provides shade, which blocks heat and radiation around buildings, providing cooling. So to build off of the Cool Cities program, we wanted to make sure through the Urban Heat Island Mitigation Program that we were funding green infrastructure, but also more comprehensive solutions, cooling centers, as well as community-driven projects at the microclimate level, such as community gardens. And something that we wanted to emphasize as well is not just tree planting, but maintenance to maximize the benefits of trees. I mean, trees not only provide cooling and energy savings, but they also absorb pollution and indirectly lower pollution by lowering energy demand. And then further, not pruning trees or maintaining trees is one of the leading contributions to power outages in the US. So it's definitely something important to bear in mind, and we wanted to emphasize that in this program. So something that we wanted to help inform, like locating areas or helping applicants in locating areas where there was high heat vulnerability, was using mapping tools. So with Rutgers, through their NJ Adapt program, we developed a tool that factored in heat vulnerability index, overburden community layer, as well as a layer showing tree canopy cover. And to further help that, we pointed applicants to the Tree Equity Score tool, which is a great tool showing tree canopy cover, and it also factors in sociodemographic information. And then again, looking at vulnerable areas based on energy burden amongst low-income populations. So for category 1, we distributed $1 million grants. There were 2 projects for this. One of the awardees, Trenton, they're planning on planting trees in census tracts with low tree canopy cover to establish green quarters, essentially connecting residential areas to critical resources such as cooling centers and hospitals. They demonstrated strong partnerships and workforce development. So through the Climate Corps program, which they're partnering with a community-based organization in Trenton with, they're planning on training the next generation of arborists, which is also important to maintenance and longevity of the project. And then in Camden, not only were we funding like shade through tree canopy and green infrastructure, but also funding built shade and blue infrastructure. So in this case, Camden will be upgrading an existing pavilion to provide enhanced shade. They'll also be installing a new playground with heat reflective materials heat reflective materials, as well as an upgraded splash pad, and the recreation department there will oversee the long-term maintenance of this project. And then for the Resilience Hub and Cooling Center fortification projects, we have a few $500,000 grants within this funding category. Trenton again received funding for this project, and they will be rehabilitating a former library location, which has been out of commission for about 10 years, but it was a critical resource for that community. So they're revitalizing that, and it will be established as a resilience hub with higher efficiency HVAC system, a cool roof, as well as a backup power source. And this will be a year-round facility, not only just a cooling center. In Pennsauken, they are establishing their youth athletic activities complex as a resilience hub, which is also another important community asset. And they had comprehensive plans for establishing a resilience hub, spanning from improved HVAC, in this case, a geothermal heat pump, energy efficiency upgrades, as well as a backup power source that integrates battery storage. And then the other two Resilience Hub projects were in Newark and Elizabeth, both in low tree canopy, high priority areas. In the case of Newark, so Newark is the second worst urban heat island in New Jersey, the worst in the state, or I'm sorry, the second worst urban heat island in the nation, and the first or the worst urban heat island in the state. And in this case, they're redeveloping a centrally located park within the Ironbound district, which experiences really high temperature and urban heat island effect. And they'll be expanding tree canopy coverage through planting drought-resistant native plants, and implementing multiple forms of blue infrastructure, as well as heat-conscious materials. And another important piece too is that this has a lot of community significance. It will be memorializing firefighters and also be used as a spot to train next generation first responders. So something that I definitely want to emphasize is the community aspect. And then the Housing Authority of the City of Elizabeth, HACE, they will be revamping a community center through various community-informed efficiency upgrades, including a cool roof, to establish a cooling center, where they mentioned that there's lack of AC access, so it would be a great place for residents to come and convene for cooling. And then for the third category, we had 20 grants, each $50,000. So these are more like micro grants for community informed projects. All of them are community informed, but this is led by community-based organizations. So all these projects are implemented within overburdened municipalities. The first two categories are implemented at the municipal level, and these projects are implemented at within more like smaller scale trusted community organizations. And a bulk of the awarded projects are related to community gardens, smaller scale tree and green infrastructure projects, and built shade. We also had projects encompassing pop-up cooling oases and community engagement. So also emergency preparedness and building forces around informing and educating residents about extreme heat. So to sum it up, we received $12.35 million in funding requests, which was well above the $5 million budget, really demonstrating a high demand for this funding and also providing a strong case for future funding as well. And we are funding projects across 10 overburdened municipalities throughout various regions in New Jersey. And these are all located within overburdened municipalities, which was the eligibility requirements for this program. Further, we're partnering with the Department of Environmental Protection, Rutgers, specifically the Center for Urban Policy Research, and various community organizations to set up temperature monitors at project sites in Newark, Trenton, and Camden, for example, as well as Atlantic City. And we're providing technical assistance to awardees for planning and also maximizing the benefits of trees through landscape architecture expertise that we have from Rutgers. And Rutgers will also be modeling the energy savings and environmental benefits of these various projects, looking at built shade as well as expanded tree canopy. Another important aspect of this program too is that we wanted to spread the word regarding other programs related to energy efficiency and ratepayer assistance. So we already let community organizations know about these resources so they can spread the word to their communities. And further, we're looking into areas where there's higher percentages of residents without air conditioning. For example, a project in Patterson, and it is in an area or census tract that has a higher percentage of the population without AC. So making sure from an equity standpoint, who these projects will be serving, and also further targeted outreach related to assistance programs that can support them in getting AC and lowering bills. So alignment, in terms of policy alignment, the municipal projects under this program support the climate change related vulnerability assessment, which is now required under the municipal land use law, and offers model case studies for addressing extreme heat. And then further, UHI mitigation is part of a multi-pronged approach, which Grace from FAS explained really well. It helps reduce temperatures inside buildings and is part of the aspect of thermal comfort and complements cooling ordinance protections. Yeah, and with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That was really interesting and informative. I think now's the time to open it up to any audience questions if they have any.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's a question or not coming from Kate, or maybe just an inadvertent unmute, but I guess I have a question maybe to kind of kick off the discussion from the, I guess for the audience, but are there any parts of the heat policy agenda that Grace was going over that feel particularly adoptable or actionable for your jurisdiction? And, are there any resources or examples that would be particularly helpful? Or maybe kind of on the converse, like, are there any parts of what Grace presented that are already being done and already being addressed in your jurisdiction that you wanted to share?
Are you posing this question to me?
This is for the audience,
okay.
or for, I think if you've got, great. I was trying to get some audience discussion and participation, but if you want to add in there too, to maybe get things going, feel free.
I mean, I think the right to cooling concept is really interesting, and urban heat mitigation, again, is part of that approach, and can help inform expanding that policy in New Jersey for sure.
Great. Maybe while the audience is kind of thinking through if there are any questions, a question for Grace. There's kind of the balance between short-term solutions and long-term solutions when you're thinking through policy options. And balancing energy affordability demands kind of while continuing to build like that are, now things that we got to be thinking about, but also building toward longer term resilience policies and goals. How do you kind of balance those two ends of the spectrum?
That's a great question. I'll kind of couch with a couple examples we observed, and I'm sure folks on the call are probably familiar with. Affordability politics, I think, is bringing light to these issues, but it is also its own, can be its own deterrent too from doing the long-term work that's needed. So a couple of things that we've observed are even rollbacks of energy codes in the name of affordability, of building new homes faster. So making arguments that because of the cost premium of adding these codes, or doing practices along these codes, they're not worth it if we need to build homes fast. And home builders associations have been a big advocate against energy codes. And so we're seeing that difficulty of those rollbacks. While there may be a long-term resilience benefit, the short-term cost savings is winning out in some of those debates. Another word that we're seeing is happening, especially in the RGGI states with the greenhouse gas initiative money, are looking at how to provide short-term bill credits to households that are really struggling right now to pay their energy bills. And so there is this short-term, how do we get the bills that are overdue, paid for, that are and keep people from losing their power. But also that money potentially could be used to invest in renewable energy, clean energy, other types of technologies that could then potentially be delivering longer term savings, grid improvements. So you're just really working between, okay, there is a near-term challenge of safety, health, well-being, but we do need to think long-term in terms of the resilience. And we do try to straddle that balance, but it is certainly, I think, a dynamic we're observing, and one that we are excited to try to build up the evidence to say, actually, maybe it not be that much of a cost premium to build to these codes. That Massachusetts example I gave, they did their Clean Energy Center did a targeted technical assistance program for Passive House and found that the cost premium of the assistance and the entities that received assistance was only between 2 and 4%. So that is cost premium. Potentially that's willing to be a premium that's paid for if you're getting better housing at the end of the day. So just to start, but certainly a lot to be trying to keep abreast of as we're balancing these different challenges.
Yeah, great answer. Grace Lowe.
Yeah, just wanted to flag a question a couple questions in the chat from Adela with NYSERDA. One for you, I think, on summer passive survivability, whether you're working at all with Energy Trust of Oregon on those metrics and kind of the expanded comfort targets. And then another, I think, for Aileen around municipal code officials and whether the UHI program including any training or technical assistance around that.
Yeah, thanks for flagging those questions in the chat. I was looking before, but then I missed it. So yeah, there's a question I think for us about summer passive survivability. At least within our section at Odo, I've not been really engaged with the work that Energy Trust of Oregon is doing there, but now I'm interested. So. And then I guess the other questions, yeah, for Grace and Aileen, about training for building code enforcement officials, addressing EH responsiveness and resilience within disadvantaged communities. So yeah, I don't know if you're able to read those questions in the chat and respond, Grace or Aileen.
I can try and address the municipal code and technical assistance question. So the technical assistance that we're providing with workers mostly focuses on project monitoring and reporting. That's definitely something to consider for the future and from a policy standpoint is thinking about local ordinances and codes and how we can implement this on a larger scale beyond just programming.
And I think NASEO can use that opportunity to plug one of our primers as our set of 5. Our colleague Liepa was the main author of one of the primers that were focused on incorporating smart surfaces into building energy codes. And I think that resource cites a few examples of jurisdictions that have explored that approach, either from like incorporating specific construction materials for roofing, for envelope, that in a prescriptive code that can kind of advance these smart surface construction materials and ensure if the code is being developed in a performance pathway, ensure that buildings are also hitting, potentially passive survivability metrics along the way. And so I think that that resource could also be a good starting point. And I'm not so sure how deeply it gets into the training and kind of code compliance and enforcement element of things, but that's certainly a key role that many state energy offices and their partners play. So we're certainly behind it.
Yeah, I cannot address the training question, but Jasmine, your response prompted me to say that we, in In our database, we did identify a lot of policies around land use and the intersections between, I think, land use and buildings is quite interesting, particularly in how to get shade, trees, and other interventions more into the built environment, as well as how do you potentially use zoning as a strategy to increase uptake of these passive cooling strategies. So Cambridge has their cool zones, which is a strategy they employed to increase urban canopy and shade around the building. And they're starting to employ that. So there's some interesting collaborations there. May not be exact answer to your question, but certainly something we're seeing. I'm not on the ground in the training, so I won't be able to answer that part.
Yeah, so I think just that discussion of like different policies that maybe reside within different functions of all of our respective jurisdictions is one of the challenges, right? Where like within our energy office, we deal with a lot of our energy related policies, but then there's other zoning issues, there's other workforce issues that might reside within other jurisdictions that sometimes like we may have a good relationship with and a working relationship with, but other times we just don't interact with those folks that often. So I wonder if there's any maybe good examples that any of the jurisdictions here have come across, or Grace or Aileen, where they can point to like best practices for how to collaborate with those other jurisdictions or those other agencies within our jurisdictions that we might be able to collaborate with and work with.
I've seen a lot of partnerships that succeed when there is a shared goal in mind. It just requires kind of multi-agency partnerships. Just again, like that zoning policy interacting with the building housing policy, how can you kind of align those so that the folks that are deep in the land use, don't know much about how to build a building, can also be working together to make that unified. And I know there's also experts that have been trying to translate, I think, between those two types of stakeholder groups so that they can actually work on this together. Another, which I know NASEO does on the call, so they'll know this way more than me. But they've done good partnerships within with the state housing department in order to better align what NYSERDA has in terms of funding, what they have in terms of funding, to try to build beyond code housing. So either using passive house or enterprise green communities. All of these are beyond code measures that include great heat resilience strategies. And so that's another kind of deep partnership that we've seen that has been quite effective. And probably the last would be like departments of labor and energy offices, I think, have strong partnerships, particularly as we're thinking about what we need to be building. How do we also do that in a way that secures good pathways for job improvement for workers, but also the safety requirements and floor that might be necessary to build those projects. So just a couple of examples, but I think that shared alignment on something to work on and then having to build your different tools and strategies and fundings to the table is always a good practice we've seen.
Yeah, great thoughts. With that, I think we're at time. So I'll just thank our presenters, thank everybody for attending, and maybe turn it over to the NASEO folks if there's any closing comments.
No, thank you, Blake, and thank you, Grace and Aileen, for presenting today. Thanks all for participating. This has been a really good discussion, and hopefully just the start of these conversations around extreme heat, energy affordability, and building and grid resilience. So thanks all, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.